Hello, my name is Damon Friedman, co-founder and president of SOF Missions. As a 20-year veteran within Special Operations, I've gone through many challenges due to my military service and time in combat. We felt called to start SOF Missions to serve our fellow brothers and sisters in arms, focusing on suicide prevention and resiliency. Our mission at SOF Missions is to empower warriors to find purpose and be resilient. Since 2011, when we started the organization, almost 3 million men and women have deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan. Unfortunately, the scars of war take a toll on their psychological, physical, social, and spiritual health. Many veterans feel a sense of hopelessness and a loss of purpose when they return to civilian life. They feel isolated and alone, unable to reconnect. And in the greatest of tragedies, over 20 veterans lose all hope and take their own lives. Our goal at SOF Missions is to provide veterans the tools and resources so that they don't become a statistic. We offer a unique approach to combating veteran suicide through a whole health intradisciplinary model. The Be Resilient program is a 4-pillar methodology that addresses the areas of psychological, physical, social, and spiritual wellness. We provide care through 3 delivery methods: medical clinics, retreats, and educational training. Since we started back in 2011, we have been able to reach veterans in all 50 states and have served over 3,000 veterans through the Be Resilient program. Being resilient is a multifaceted and complex issue. We know that to find a lasting solution, we have to address the whole warrior. Many challenges cannot be solved by providing the treatments and modalities of just one component, but by tackling them all. Now, we've expanded our services to include law enforcement and first responders. Together, we can make a lasting impact in the lives of warriors across the nation. To learn more, visit our website at sofmissions.org.
For your post assignment, all units proceed to your post assignment.
All right. Welcome back.
Misfit Nation. The Misfit Nation Show.
We are a show founded by a veteran and hosted by 2 veterans and a military spouse. Our mission is to get people to tell their stories to the world. If you're an author, share your tips with the Misfit Nation. If you're a musician or an actor, our audience needs to know how they too can get into the business. Coaches, we love our coaches. Come on and share your tips with the Misfit Nation to help them become better versions of themselves. If you are a corporate leader or an entrepreneur, come on and show how you did it and how hard you have fought for success. If you are a veteran, first responder, or Gold Star family, we would love to have you come on and share your story with the Misfit Nation. We always have time for you. If you're feeling down, alone, or starting to see the darkness, Stop. Think about those who are around you. You are not alone. You will be missed. If you feel like your problems will be a burden to those in your inner circle or feel embarrassed, dial 988. If you are a veteran, take option 1. We need you to keep pushing forward. Don't make a permanent solution to a temporary problem. If you are a new listener, welcome to the Misfit Nation Show. Be sure to subscribe to our show on your favorite podcast app. Also on our YouTube channel at @the_Misfit Nation. Subscribe and click the bell to keep you up to date on our latest episodes and all of our news. You can also find us on Heroes Media Group and About Face Radio. Now, let's get to the show!
It's Tuesday. Before we start, we have some sad news coming out of Ohio and Louisiana. Special Deputy Sheriff Larry Henderson of Hamilton County Sheriff's Office in Ohio, end of watch Friday, May 2nd, 2025. Lieutenant Alan Nucci Credor, Rain Police Department, Louisiana, end of watch Monday, May 5th, 2025. Let's keep these officers friends, their families, their peers, and their communities in your thoughts and prayers, especially Sheriff Henderson's community. That community is going to go through a lot right now due to that incident on both sides of the coin. So let's keep those communities in our thoughts and prayers as they go through a tough time. Do you want to share a story of a loved one lost in combat or after service? Do you have a story that you want to share with the Misfit Nation? We are here to have those stories told. We're here for you. We want those stories told. Our audience wants to hear them, and you are the ones to share them with us. But now, as we get ready for another nightly talk with the boys behind the microphone, we are here to let you know that, oh, hell yes, the boys, they are back, and they're ready to rumble. That's right. The music starts. The lights go dimmer. The boys are in their uniforms. They're ready to rock. They're ready to roll. They're here to tell you another week is down. The boys are pumped for another episode. Cagney is fresh from his day off. Lacey, ready to pounce after mowing the grass all day. They have not been stagnant all week. They've been studying. They've been learning about things to do on this show. So now reach up. Pull down those shoulder straps. Look out the windshield, and let's get ready to rock and roll. Get it, boys!
Thank you for that introduction. Good evening. Good evening. Good evening. How are you doing this evening, Stephen?
I am fantastic. How are you?
I am wonderful. Life is good. Got my part of the grass cut today, so Mrs. Holland will take care of the rest of that tomorrow before we get some rain, and everything's good.
Had nothing but rain here for the last few days.
Yeah, I heard that everything up there's a little wet. Hey, before we get
grass is growing.
yes, it is. Hey, before we get started tonight, this last Sunday was the National Fallen Firefighters Remembrance Day, and I have a firefighter that I want to mention, very near and dear to my heart. I grew up with his mom and dad. He followed in. His dad was a firefighter. His grandfather was a firefighter. Great family. I like I said, known them all my life. And I just wanted to remember tonight, Kendall Murphy, end of tour, November 10th, 2017. And just, he is missed and he will always be remembered in our hearts. And, I just wanted to make mention of that.
That's great. Here we go. Got one for you. From Olympus. Olympus fell to you. What about National EOD Day, Hurt Locker?
Well, I celebrated that too. I did not go to the memorial this year. I haven't been in a long time, but I did celebrate it, and I watched some clips of the memorial celebration, and it looked like everyone had a good time, and the auction looked like it was especially fun. So yes, I did do some remembering and did do some reflection on that day.
Okay. All righty then.
So are we? I tell you what. Let me introduce our guest, Dr. Matt Kutz.
That's what we're here for? I thought we were just going to babble for like an hour.
Hey, we've got him sitting there in the green room. We might as well introduce him and get him on here. He got a PhD in global leadership. He's an award-winning author, educator, researcher, and speaker. But you know what he's most excited about?
His grandkids.
Well, being a husband, a dad, and a grandfather. And I tell you what, I concur. So without any further ado, let's get him in here.
Good evening, Matt. How are you?
And
Good evening, Matt.
I can tell already you guys are a ton of fun.
Oh,
we tried.
You never know what's going to come up on this show. Now, before we get started, or we can actually get started, but we gave just a little bit about your bio. Why don't you just start from whenever you want to start and bring us up to where we are now. Tell us about yourself.
Boom. Yeah. So thanks. So yeah, my background is sports medicine. So my training, I was an athlete in high school, athlete in college. When I went to try to pick a major, I wasn't too academically inclined, we'll put it that way. I was more interested in playing ball and things like that. So I picked a major that had athletic in the title of the major, had no idea what I was getting myself into. Lo and behold, I picked athletic training, which I really didn't know at the time was a healthcare profession. And so it's very akin to physical therapy. I hate it when I have to use that description because it's a different discipline, but it's like the sports medicine. So we're the folks that take care of injuries, do rehabilitation, evaluate injuries on the field with the athletes and carry them all the way through from diagnosis to return to play. So that's my background. And in the middle of that, again, life happens, things happen. I found myself making a little adjustment, ended up falling in love with leadership studies of all things, and decided to go get a PhD later on. I'm not one of these guys who, got their PhD right away and never worked in the real world. In fact, I get myself in trouble with my colleagues for making fun of PhDs who've never done anything before. It's one thing to read a book and learn something, and which has its place. I understand that, but I'm really I'm more of that. Let's live a little life first, and then say something. So anyway, that's what I do. My background, like I said, sports medicine, but then I transitioned to this leadership thing. Love it. Wrote a bunch of books. Lived in Africa for a while. Lived in Australia for a while. Traveling around as a Fulbright scholar, doing different things and just having a great time.
Awesome. Where were you at in Africa?
Rwanda.
Okay. I spent some time in Ethiopia, and I don't know what you thought of it, but I didn't leave anything on that continent.
I know. Yeah, Ethiopia is a little bit different. They actually call Rwanda the jewel of Africa is the name. It's the smallest country in Africa, right beneath Burundi, and just a little bit southwest of Kenya. And it's a tiny little mountainous country, a lot of gorillas. A lot of people go there to see the gorillas. Uganda is a neighboring country where Jane Goodall did her work with the chimpanzees and all that kind of stuff. So it's a little tourist spot in the middle of Africa. It's green, it's lush. We actually lived there for about 7 months. I was there as a faculty member at one of the universities there.
Okay.
And if anybody's ever watched the television show on HGTV, House Hunters International, we were actually on that show when we lived over there, and they came over and watched us do that, which kind of a funny story. It's I don't know if you've ever seen the show or not, but it's people looking for houses, and then they watch them look for houses. It's like a reality TV thing. And so my wife's at one room at one house on one side of the house. I'm on the other side of the house. I happen to walk by the bathroom. I looked in this bathroom, and it was one of these. It was an unusually plush and nice shower for what we were expecting to see in Africa.
Uh-huh.
So I yelled down the hallway to my wife, who's in the other part of the house looking in the kitchen. And I said, "Hey, honey, this shower is big enough for both of us." And that's the soundbite that HGTV decided to use for all the cutaways to the commercials and the transition and scenes and stuff like that. So 3 days after that episode aired, my wife and I are just sitting in our local town at a restaurant we go to for our date night. And we're just eating our dinner, and this gentleman walks by the table and stops and kind of awkward pause, just long enough to make it awkward, but not like creepy yet, kind of a thing, But and then he walked on. So we're like, okay, what was that about? And then like 5 minutes later, he comes back to our table, and he stops and he gets my attention, and he says, "Sir, I'm sorry, but are you the 2-person shower guy that I just saw on And I'm just like, yes, sir. I'm proud to say that I'm the 2-person shower
That was
guy.
me.
Awesome. You know what? There's worse things to be known for.
That's right. That's right.
That's awesome. That
Yeah,
is
well, that's
awesome.
my HGTV story there. But yeah, it was a lot. It was a lot of fun. But we learned a lot on that trip too. And we took our kids and that kind of thing. So it was a lot of fun. And now both my boys have this travel bug that I can't get out of them. And my wife and I regret it a little bit sometimes because they're all over the place now.
I think it's amazing when kids are young and you can get them out and travel and expose them.
There's no better from a leadership perspective, which is, my professional interest, is there's few things you can do to encourage and to build and to foster leadership and just decision making and being able to handle ambiguity and complexity than getting kids on international trips, for sure.
Yes, I have a granddaughter, and her parents, our daughter and son-in-law, are pastors, and they do a lot of mission trips around the world. And she's 16 years old and has been everywhere. Yep. And just loves it. And
yep, that's awesome. That's what started me. My dad was a pastor, so I'm a pastor's kid. And I remember going abroad my first time on a mission trip at 12 years old, and I got the bug and I travel a lot now and love it.
Yep. Meet some interesting people. So you've written a lot of books, including one on contextual intelligence.
Yeah.
And how does your writing impact your leadership journey, and what's the message that you hope to get across?
Yeah. So my writing has been profound for me personally. A lot of times I think I write just for my own benefit, because a lot of times I don't know what I think until I write it, until I work through it and go through that. So it's been incredibly valuable on my end for my own formation, being able to articulate what I think, what I believe, how it works. And so that's important for me. But I've been very blessed to have been able to write a few semi-successful books. Most of the books being an academic, they're, I like to say, a pracademic. But, being a practically oriented academic, I have written a few textbooks. And I always joke that, nobody reads textbooks. If there's a great place where people hide a lot of good information are in textbooks, because who wants to read a textbook? And so I tried my hand at, well, let me write some more of these business popular press books and see what happens. And so the first book that I wrote kind of in this popular press, find it, Books A Million, Barnes and Noble kind of thing. It's a book I call Contextual Intelligence, and it's about navigating complexity and uncertainty. And it's kind of a framework that I developed that I call, based around this concept of what I call 3D thinking. And the 3D thinking stands for the 3 dimensions of time. So past, present, future. And in the book, I call it hindsight, insight, and foresight, and how critically important it is for anybody at any level, at any age for that matter, to integrate all 3 of those time orientations into their decision making. What we know from research and evidence and experience is most people won't make as good a decision or as informed a decision if they're only using 1 or 2 of those time orientations. And it's easy to say, you guys can probably predict pretty easy, most people default to hindsight as their number 1 influencer in decision making. What happened last time? I tried this before, it didn't work, or I tried this before and it did work. And we go to hindsight very often, and that's fine to do. And I would never say we should not use hindsight, but where the mistake comes in and where a lot of people don't make the best decision they could is that they only use hindsight. And what my encouragement is, and the big lesson that I am able to communicate and carry on, is we need to use hindsight, insight, and foresight, all 3 as equally as we can. So we want to, use history as history is a fantastic teacher, but history is important so that you know where you're going. And a lot of times we only want to talk about, well, where are we going? Where are we heading? What's the future look like? And again, those people who only worry about the future are missing a whole lot if they don't take time to think about what happened before, what happened in the past. History will repeat itself, and if you don't know what history is, then you're just, some of the mistakes repeat themselves, and that's your fault for just being stupid, and so you have to integrate all three time orientations. And of course, insight is obvious. That's just paying attention to real time, what's right in front of you right now. What are your actual resources that you have to do what you need to do? And when we have all three of those things in place, then we can actually make a better decision and take in a more holistic picture.
Okay. All right.
So when I'm working on a car and I touch a hot pipe and say, "Damn, that's hot," I shouldn't touch it 3 more times to see if it's still hot. Like
That's
right.
That's a hindsight weakness. Right. Exactly right. That's a weakness in hindsight for sure.
Is it still hot? I do it all the time.
Let me tell you where the idea came from. This is kind of a funny story too, because people often ask me, so where this idea of contextual intelligence and being aware of your environment through these three lenses come from? And it goes back to a story that I tell. I love to tell it because people get a laugh out of it. So that's my fun. But it is an interesting story. So I'm 10-ish, 11-ish years old. I'm coming home from school. I had a pretty standard routine that I would drop my bag right by the door, say hi to my mom if she was there, and grab a snack in the kitchen, and right out the back door, screw homework, just right out the back door to play ball. We always played baseball with the neighborhood kids down the road. So this particular day, I'm coming home from school, and my mom's waiting there to tell me that I can't go play today because I didn't do my morning chores before school. So I had to do all my chores before that I needed to do, and then I had to do all the extra disciplinary chores for not doing my original chores. So I had extra stuff to do. So I'm upset, right? So what I didn't know is today, unlike any other day, my dad was home in the kitchen out of my eyesight. I didn't know he was there. And because he was usually still at work, when I got home from school. And what's important to know about my dad now is my dad was a huge Star Trek fan. The original Star Trek, James T. Kirk, Mr. Spock,
Okay.
And he prided himself on the Vulcan death grip. I mean, this was his thing. I mean, growing up, it was a game in the house all the time. He always wanted to practice. Hey, let me see if I can get that right. And sure enough, he always got it. I mean, you found that nerve right there, And so, any rate, I come home. My mom tells me this, so I'm upset. It's like I wanted to go play. I've been in school all day. And so I don't remember what I said. My mother still to this day doesn't remember what I said. I just know that I disrespected my mom in some way. My dad is on the other side of the door or wall listening to the whole thing. So as soon as I disrespected her, he comes running around the door and boom, applies the Vulcan death grip, immediately, and boom, and then got it. And he found the nerve the first time. It's like, my arm's going numb. I feel that stinger. Football, you get that stinger in your shoulder, and it was that kind of a thing. He's got the nerve right there, and so he walks me over to the wall. Right, he is as cool and as calm as anybody can be. So he's not like in a rage or anything, because people wonder, well, was he being abusive? No, he was just being dad. And got me there, walks me over to the wall, cool and calm, gets down in my face, like right here, like, right in my face, eyeball to eyeball. And he says to me something that just blew my mind as an 11-ish year old. He said, "Don't you ever talk to my wife like that again." And what was amazing to me, and I remember thinking, I mean, I'm not exaggerating, guys. I remember thinking to myself, who's your wife? I mean, all I'm thinking about is like, wait a second, this is not computing. It's like, that's my mom, and I only ever knew her and identified with her as my mom. And here my dad was now introducing another dimension to who she was and her identity that I never even thought about. I mean, it's obvious. Yeah, I know she's your wife, but I never related to her that way. I only ever thought of her as my mom. And for the last 10, 11 years of my life, as far as I knew, I could always talk to my mom like that. But all of a sudden, it's his wife, and he's got a skin in the game.
Yeah.
you know, how this goes, which I didn't even realize. And so, you know, my dad was a kind of funny dude because he said, don't you ever talk to my wife like that again. And then he goes on to say, and if you do, we'll kill you. And nobody will ever know you're gone because we can make another one that looks just like you. You know, it's like, so, you know, that's my dad for you. But I remember, so anyway, so then he let me go and sit me, do your chores and stop back talking your mom, you know? And so I remember thinking, now this didn't happen immediately, but I remember thinking over time, if that situation had played out the exact same way that it did with my dad, and it was my grandpa who was there, you know, he would have said, don't talk to my daughter like that. And if it was my uncle, he would have said, don't talk to my sister like that. And all of the sudden, I remember my brain like exploding with the revelation that this woman who I only ever knew and interacted with in one dimension was multidimensional. And other people related to her differently. Here she in fact was a mom, but also a wife and a sister and a daughter and a friend and, you know, all these other things. And I was only interacting with her on one dimension, one level. And I was missing so much of who she was, what she cared, what other people needed. And, you know, my dad was always say this too. He would say, listen, son, we love you. And I did. I had a great home, great upbringing, great family. He says, we love you, but you need to understand that me and your mom, we were a thing before you were a thing. And we're going to be a thing when you're gone. So you need to understand you are just a passing phase in our life, you know? And while you're here, we will love you. We will educate you. We will shelter you, feed you, you know, all this stuff. We'll keep you safe and all that stuff. But it was very clear that, you know, this was a relationship that was different. And I took that with me into my college days, early adulthood, you know, my, you know, development as now I hope and pray that I'm a man that gives back to society in the way that as best I can. And that development stemmed a lot from those types of interactions. And that's when and where and how the whole concept of contextual intelligence emerged for me is if people make too many mistakes that shouldn't be made. And a lot of times it's purely because they fail to recognize their place in the world. And how they fit and where they're at. And they just, you know, they get out of their lane, just stay in your lane, do what you can do, you know, and then they forget or are ignorant of the fact that the people you are interacting with are more, there's more to them. They're more nuanced. There's more character. There's more personality there than just how you relate to them. And if we can pay attention to that, we can make much better decisions. And that, I think, is a huge leadership lesson and insight. So that's my story about that and where that came from.
All right.
Okay, now, if I could just take this a step further, because, you know, my mind, I'm just a little odd sometimes, but you're saying, as you thought back, it could have been your grandfather saying my daughter. I would say, I'd look back and say it's my grandfather. He's a next generation back. He might have put my head through the wall if he heard me say that, and not just give me the claw. You know, it's not you were talking to my daughter. No, your head went through the wall because that's how they took care of the problems back in the day. And then the next generation played the little claw trick. You know?
That'd be
I think there was a little bit of a grandfather in there.
They didn't get an iPad and get told to, you know, sit in the corner or something.
Oh, geez, Louise. Yeah, I'm the other guy too who never, you know, that's bogus. You know, my wife and I actually we've been married 32 years, and I know that's a lot for some and not a lot for others. And we do a lot of parenting and marriage workshops. And one of the things that just comes up repeatedly, I'm sure this won't surprise you guys, but, you know, it just, how do I discipline my kids, you know, and stuff like this? How do I keep a home in order? And because they tell me things like, well, I put them in timeout and whatever. It's like, they listen, I mean, I don't want to step on any toes. I don't know, you know, but that's just not my It's just not how I was raised and not how I grew up. Because you're absolutely right, Cagney. My grandpa would have put my head through the wall and then said whatever it was. And which I think my dad was kind of what my dad was getting at with, well, we'll kill you and nobody will know you're gone. You know, we'll make it that looks just like you kind of a thing. Was I'm sure my grandpa rubbing off on him a little bit. And again, my grandpa was a great man. But it was, you know, just an interesting experience. But you're right. And how we interact and know your environment. Again, I think that's what contextual intelligence is. You know, I think that's really important. It's like based on the era and time you find yourself in, know what would happen. And the same is true even today, depending on where you're at, the type of family, the part of the world, different communities. There are different ways to interact that a lot of people just take for granted, and they think, well, everybody's like us, and that's not true. We're usually the odd person out, you know, and everybody else is not like us. But it's been a ton of fun. So,
all right, we have a question from Salvador 7. You train leaders around the world. What's one trait you see in all truly great leaders, regardless of culture or industry?
Oh, great question. Yeah, great question. So what's one trait? So it would be hard to narrow it down to one trait, but I think one thing that is universal that good leaders have to have, and that's what I refer to as foresight. And what I mean, and I maybe describe foresight a little bit different, because a lot of people will hear me say foresight and they'll think vision for the future. They'll think, you know, big picture, predict what's going to happen down the road. And I think of foresight as being, and how I describe it and define it is, I think of foresight as being able to articulate, and I mean literally articulate, being able to say it in words, what the future should look like, and here's the kicker, how we are going to get there. And some people confuse that with what I call fantasy. So I always ask leaders when I'm interacting with them, and they tell me whatever it is they want to do, or their vision or their hope or their plan, whatever. And I ask them, okay, is that foresight or is that fantasy? And how I distinguish between the two, someone who is operating in fantasy uses what I call is the I can't because clause. So for example, they'll say, hey, I want to finish my education. I want to have a great relationship. I want to have a good marriage. I want to, you know, give back to the, whatever it is they want to do. They'll say, I want to do this, but I can't because. And it's the, but I can't because, that's a red flag immediately. That's like, okay, buddy, or, you know, sister, you are living in a fantasy right now. You want to do this thing, but you don't have a means or a way to get there. And so I do my leadership training with people. I ask them, all right, so how do you plan to accomplish this thing, whatever it is? And if they can articulate it to me to where I can understand it and see it also, that's how we know someone has entered into foresight. And to answer your question, Salvador, those who are practice leaders who are making a difference, leaders who around the world, regardless of whatever obstacles they have, whatever political structure they're under, are successful, I believe, if they have that foresight capacity.
Okay.
And I have a question for you, going back to your sports medicine. I have severe arthritis in both my knees.
Yep.
They tried gel shots, did absolutely nothing. They tried cortisone. It makes the popping lower. It's actually, the knees are getting worse to walk on. They want me to do PT before they decide if they're going to operate. What is it they're going to have me doing PT that I don't do every day, walking around a shop working on?
Yeah, great question. So what they're going to do in PT is something that we, you know, behind the curtain kind of call prehab. And, you know, we rehab, but prehab. A lot of times the success of a surgery depends on the muscle tone and coordination and balance before you go in. So what they're going to do is probably less muscle training work and more balance and agility and coordination work. Because what's again, when you hit a sweet spot for me, because my area within sports medicine is what neuromuscular physiology. And so that's just a fancy word for saying I love how the muscles and nerves interact. And what they're going to do in PT is focus on your neuromuscular response. They're going to work on reflexes and balance and things like that, because that's usually what keeps people from healing well and recovering well. It's not so much that I don't have strength in my muscle, because if you can walk up and down stairs and do a leg extension with some moderate amount of weight, that's as strong as you need to be to ambulate and to even, do a little bit of a quick jog if you needed to, if a dog's chasing you or something, But what they're more interested in is the falling. If they have to do a reconstruction, they want what's called the proprioceptors, which is just the nerves around your joints, in your knee in particular, needs to know where it's at in space. If you were to close your eyes and I were to come over and take your leg and bend your knee, you'd be able to tell me, even with your eyes closed, not seeing, that I just bent your knee, right? And so how do you know that? Well, that's the proprioceptors in your knee telling you that my knee is flexed now, or he just pulled my leg and straightened it out. You know that even without seeing me do that. And that's what they're training. Right. And the pop maybe too. But hopefully when the pop goes away, after the surgery or whatever, you're going to need that. So that's what they're going to do in rehab for you. They're going to build that capacity, which is not something you're doing on your own very often if you're not doing things that require more agility and things like that.
Because me being me, I have the paperwork. I still haven't called. I should call and start getting in at least a couple of days a week just to get it started, because, like I said, it's progressively getting worse. It's not getting better. And that's what the doctor, that's why I figured I'd ask the question of what they would be having me do, because it's going to run into my head, like, the hell are they going to make me do?
Yeah, no, they're going to do balance coordination kind of things there.
Oh, okay.
Well, Stephen, after you get that done, maybe your brother will show a little bit of empathy and come and stay with you and help you rehab and wait on you hand and foot.
Yeah, I doubt that. I love him, but no.
Sometimes we don't need help from our brothers like that. Yeah, not in this life.
We got another question that popped up here from Jojo Shishibottom. Thank you for that question. Can you explain the concept of contextual intelligence in simple terms and why it's crucial in today's chaotic world? Good question. Thank you for that question, Jojo.
Yeah. So let me answer. Well, in simple terms, contextual intelligence is understanding your environment and responding to it appropriately in real time. Okay. So a lot of people, it's this idea of, so many people have blinders on, going through life with blinders on, not paying attention to what's going on around them, have no idea who their neighbor is, what their neighbor believes, not that you've got to be, crazy about that, but, just general things, and somebody who is contextually intelligent is actually paying attention to what's going on around them so they can make informed decisions instead of guessing all the time. The whole goal and why it's important in a VUCA world or a chaotic world is to mitigate the risk of making the wrong decision or a bad decision. So someone who practices contextual intelligence pays attention to what's going on. They're alert to people's values, the situations, the temperature and climate in a room or within a certain personality. And then which is the easy part. The hard part is then acting intelligently once you know that. So it's a two-pronged kind of approach. So it's contextual awareness. So again, that's the atmosphere in the room, the vibe in the room, kind of a thing. Is this a hostile environment? Is this a friendly environment? Is this person being sarcastic? So it's paying attention to that and learning that. But then the second part of that is then acting appropriately based on that information that's coming in real time. So, if someone's being sarcastic with you, then to be sarcastic back. If someone is, and that sounds obvious. It really does. And I promise you, especially at today's day and age, when people are, and especially the younger generation in particular, are more and more learning their social skills through not real social interactions, their virtual stuff like that, then it's becoming more difficult and not as easy. And that's why they struggle. This is my opinion. I'm not talking as a scholar or researcher here, but this is my opinion. I believe this is why they struggle more on their first job, early in their careers, not understanding what's going on, because they have to learn all this stuff, the contextual intelligence, in an accelerated pace in real time. Whereas in bygone eras, we learned that, your generation learned that just growing up with life. You interact with people, you learn stuff like that. You were much more astute and attuned to what was going on in the world around you, more aware. And the generation today is not. And so that's one thing. And then to the second part of your question is, why is it important in chaos? Is because the world is getting more chaotic. It's always been. And I hate to talk about, well, this was the worst it's ever been or anything like that, because you talk to people in other generations, other eras, they thought it was the worst it was then too. And they had their own issues to deal with. And that needs to be honored and respected. Kind of that hindsight we talked about. But it has been accelerating at a quicker pace because of technology and other things these days. So the chaos is spiraling quicker and quicker. And if we're slower and slower on the contextual intelligence side, the world is getting, excuse my poor grammar, badder and badder, so to speak. And that's why it's important now to learn it, and why it's resonating so much with leadership development in particular.
Yeah. And it is getting chaotic, but I don't know. I just think everybody always seems to see the negative in everything. Look for the positive things that are going on in your life.
Amen. Yep.
I mean, for every one negative thing, I can probably name 10 positive things that
here's the rule. I walked in, I was having lunch with a buddy, and I walked in, he was already sitting at the bar. And so I came up and sat next to him, and I said, "Hey, how's it going?" And he looked at me and he said, "It's 90% good and 10% bad. The sucky thing is I tend to only think about that 10%, know?" And for me, he was just tongue in cheek, but for me, it was like, it was mind blowing, because I said, that's exactly how it is. And you hit it right on the head, Lacey. I mean, there's more good out there than there is bad, but for some reason we focus on that bad. And that's something else that a contextually intelligent person does that other people don't. They recognize the true reality of what's going on. That's the insight piece. It's like, yeah, this is bad right now, but look at all these other good things, and that's critical, because without that insight, you feel hopeless.
Did you hear that, Rich? I did something intelligent. Recognize.
So what you're saying is, when I talk to my wife after a 12-hour shift and I'm driving home, and she says, "How was your day?" and I say, "Well, I didn't kill anybody," that's not really a good answer.
No.
That's the general answer.
Yeah. Oh,
I
it's
didn't
funny.
kill anybody. And she's like, "That's always good."
Didn't kill anybody today. Yeah. Oh, that's funny. But I mean, that's a good place to start. I mean, if it's a real alternative, it's a real option, then that is a good answer, I suppose. But
well, I do work retail, and sometimes you have to grab somebody by the neck, but
Oh yeah. I get it. But yeah, it's an interesting concept.
We're gonna flip back over to the sports side now.
Okay.
I have Frank wants to know, I take 8-hour time release arthritis formula every night to be able to sleep with my arthritis. Is that okay to take every night?
Ooh, that's a lot to take every night. I mean, I don't know what the actual prescribed amount is, but if you need to take that much to sleep, I mean, I would talk to an orthopedic specialist to figure out some other kinds of interventions, because that's just wreaking havoc on your liver, your kidneys, other things like that. So yeah, Rick, that's a lot.
All right.
That sounds like a lot.
Yeah, it
And
does.
again, I was taking a handful of leave every morning just to be able to walk. So
Yeah. Thank you for that
didn't
question,
help.
Frank. Now I got a question for you. Reading through your bio, you are a cancer survivor.
Correct. Current cancer warrior. Yeah.
Current cancer warrior. Well, best wishes with your battle. And how is your battle with cancer? How has that reshaped your perspective on leadership and personal growth?
Huge, and I don't know how much time we have, but I could talk for an hour just on this, but great question. And I was diagnosed in November of 23, and it was an accident actually that we found out. I was actually training for a triathlon, and I've always been active in 5Ks, 10Ks, half marathons, triathlons, and something that I do just to keep me competitive from my high school and college days. And I had crashed my bike on a training ride and broke my thumb. And so I was having just a follow-up visit with my physician just to check on the thumb, make sure it's all right, that kind of stuff. And he happened to be looking through his folder, my medical papers. And he was like, "Hey dude, you never came in for your 50-year-old well check kind of thing. You're all, your colonoscopy and all the stuff you're supposed to do at 50, you never came in to do that." And I was 52. So it was, 2 years, you're 2 years past due on this thing. And he goes, "We need to do that." And I'm like, "I feel fine." I mean, this is my personal physician who's known me for 15 years. It's like, I'm running triathlons, I'm running half marathons, I'm healthy. You've got last time we did my blood work, my blood pressure is good, my cholesterol is good, all that stuff. And he's like, "Yeah, well, we still just need to do it. It's protocol, and it's not going to cost you anything. The insurance is going to cover it." And I'm like, "Oh, there it is. That's what you want to do this for. You just want a paycheck, you want a kind of thing." And he goes, "Well, but it's still important, and I'm like, "All right." So he said, "Hey, the phlebotomist is across the hallway. Why don't you go get your blood work done?" So I did. And about 3 days later, he calls me and he's like, "Matt, you need to see a specialist right away. Your prostate antigens, PSAs, are off the charts. They're not just high. They're like astronomically high. 54 was my PSA. So anybody out there listening,
that's
that's a normally high is like 2, 3, 9, and that, and they're dangerous levels at 9. So mine was 54. And so I call the urologist, and he sees me, agrees to see me right away. And then he comes in and he does a couple tests there in the office and comes back, and he's like, "Dude, you've got cancer." And he's like, "But don't worry, it's the good kind." It's and he didn't say the good kind. He said the easy kind.
Okay.
And he's like, "We can treat this. A lot of men get prostate cancer, blah, blah, blah. It's manageable. It's treatable. Here's the plan. Here's your options." My wife happened to be with me. So we went through the whole thing and decided to have the prostatectomy. And so we scheduled the surgery and all that stuff. And, of course, before the surgery, they've got to do the biopsies and, all that kind of stuff. And my doctors was nice enough. Not only did they do the prostate removal right then there, at the same time they did the removal, they had another physician in the OR with him and did the colonoscopy that I was supposed to have also. So
hey.
I got a 2-for-1,
Yeah.
But at any rate, so when the biopsies came back, they're like, my surgeon, who's a great guy, but he was like, "Dude, this is not the easy kind." He goes, we were wrong. It's metastasized already, and there's a little bit. We found some. We need to do some other tests because it's metastasized, and they found out that it was in little couple spots in my lymph nodes and in my pelvis, part of my bone.
Yeah.
And so you've got some work ahead of you. My survival rate plummeted, the risk plummeted, my treatment schedule, regimens, everything changed on us overnight. And so that was concerning to my wife and I. And of course, being the researcher that I am, just by my trade, of course, I start reading the data and the research and all right away, and doesn't look good. Guys who have the type of cancer that I have generally have a 5-year survival rate.
Mm-hmm.
And so I, again, doing the research that I have, talking to physicians, that doesn't feel right because I feel good. And I was that guy who didn't have any symptoms. Like I said, I was there for my thumb, checking that up. And a lot of guys who have prostate issues, they have frequent urination, can't cut off their stream, weak stream, erectile dysfunction, all that kind of stuff. And I was having none of that. I was having no symptoms whatsoever. And here my prostate was the size of a baseball, and my doctor was actually joking. He's like, dude, I can't believe that you don't feel like you're sitting on a baseball every time you sit down. It's like, no, I don't, And anyways, so we go through the thing, and now I've got to do different kinds of treatments and all that. And one of the things that I had to do was radiation, and I had to do 38 days of radiation every day, all day. So I had to cancel some gigs. I had just signed a new client with the NFL. Actually, the National Football League was inviting me to do a keynote address for their Player Safety and Leadership Summit. And I was super excited about it. And I had to cancel that because I was starting radiation. I had to cancel some other things. And so I was kind of down. And I promise I'm getting to answer your question here.
Okay.
But, and so I made a commitment to myself when I asked my wife to help me stay accountable. I said, because I'm not the kind of guy who can just roll over and I've got to fight. I've got to do something. I've got to have something to look forward to. And so I said, what I'm going to do during this radiation, instead of being discouraged and depressed from the diagnosis, the treatment, and now the canceling of, what I was really excited about with a couple new clients and gigs, I'm going to write 1,000 words every day for the 40 days, for the 40 days of my radiation. And so this is where the answer to your question comes in. How has it shaped my leadership philosophy? And so I was like 3 days into that. Now I'd started the writing purely thinking it would be like cathartic, and it was going to be like a journal and me explaining my feelings and my emotions for, in case I did die, that, for my kids to see and read and understand, and that kind of thing was what I thought I was going to be doing for these 40 days. Day 3 into it, I started thinking about that training accident. And I remember the day that I broke my thumb. I went to the doctor because my wife took a t-shirt because she thought it was funny that I broke my thumb, Mr. Tough Guy, breaks his thumb or whatever. And I had a t-shirt on that said, "Epic Life." Have an epic life. And it was my own t-shirt brand that I made with my MK Leadership brand here, which is my leadership consulting company. And so it was an MK Leadership brand, my own brand of calling it Epic Life. And I remembered that, and that was just an idea that I had, and I wasn't spending much time on it, but I started writing about, well, what is epic to me? And I created an acronym that epic is somebody who is epic, is excellent, they are perceptive, they are inspired, and they are compassionate. EPIC, epic, excellent, perceptive, inspired, and compassionate. And I don't know what happened, guys. It was literally like the heavens opened, and I just spent the next 36 days or 34 days, and every day I just wrote on what it meant to be epic in these 4 things. When I was done with radiation and finished that writing assignment, I had a book, and it's actually coming out this summer, July of 2025. My next and latest book is called Becoming Epic, a Remedy for Mediocrity. And then how every person from a leadership perspective, if you want to be a better performer, a better leader, you have to be epic. And then again, being epic is you've got to do everything that's within your power to be excellent. Your work needs to be excellent. Your attitude needs to be excellent. Work ethic, the quality, your outcomes of your life, they need to be excellent. You need to be perceptive. This is where I bring in, again, the concept of 3D thinking and how to actually perceive you've got to perceive what's going on around you better than everybody else. And you've got to be more accurate. then you have to be inspired. You got to have something to live for, something that inspires you, something that gives you hope, something that you can give other people to help them be inspired. And then you have to be compassionate. And compassion, again, goes two ways. It's not just being empathetic, but in the true terms of calm, which is the Latin for with, compassion, with passion. You have to do things. And then passion, interestingly enough, is defined differently than how we in America have let it evolve to be. If you think of the phrase, the passion of the Christ, for example, we're talking about, and if you have a Christian background, you know that that's the crucifixion, the passion of the Christ. And so passion originally defined, the word meant pain and suffering. And so when you think of compassion, it means literally with or abiding with or together with pain and suffering. So that's what it means to be compassionate. And I just synthesize that very simply to mean a compassionate person does the hard thing, makes the hard choice, does what's painful now to benefit from it later. Who are they compassionate on? They're compassionate on their future self. They're compassionate by doing the hard thing now. They're compassionate on their family by doing the hard thing now. And then, of course, it still means be empathetic with your fellow man, but it also means do the hard thing. So that's what I think it means to be epic. And now, to directly answer your question, my leadership philosophy has changed, or at least I've been able to articulate it way better now because of the cancer journey that I've been on. And I still have about 11 more months of ADT, which is androgen deprivation therapy. And then I'm not taking chemo, but I am taking a chemo pill.
Okay.
And so I've got 11 more months of that. One of the things that we're proud about, we being my wife and I, we started a foundation because we couldn't get because a lot of guys have what I have. Back to that 5-year survival rate thing. The reason why it was only a 5-year survival rate, because most guys who get the type of cancer that I have are 85 years old. And so they die out naturally. And it's really not the cancer that killed them. It was something else. So the data shows, hey, they lived 5 years after they started this treatment, but it wasn't because the cancer killed them. It's because they were 92, 93, and they just went for other reasons. That was encouraging to me, very
yeah.
So I'm looking for help, and there's a lot of prostate cancer groups out there, but really not a lot for the type that I have. So my wife and I started a foundation. You're going to love this because we call the foundation Battle for the Bulge. Instead of Battle of the Bulge, Battle for the Bulge, which is kind of tongue in cheek. We're talking about that kind of thing. So
yeah.
So we have the Battle for the Bulge campaign, and we do 5Ks, family runs, and the whole point of that campaign is to raise money and awareness for prostate cancer survivors, prostate cancer warriors who need resources, need education, and need research. So,
all right. Well, hey, we are getting close to our time. Misfit Nation, I'm sorry if we didn't get to your questions. Matt, thank you very much for coming on this evening. We're at about 58 minutes right now. Couple things before we go. If somebody wants to contact you, can they just go through your website, www.matthewkutz.com? Kutz.com?
Yes,
all
sir.
right. And there's a contact in there. Your books are available through the website and on Amazon, correct?
Yes.
All right. So look him up. You can get his books through there, Misfit Nation. Now, real quick, I need 3 things that Matt has to do, non-negotiable, every day when his feet hits the floor.
First thing I do is pray every morning.
Okay.
So I can't start my day without that. I pray. I actually write still. And it is a little bit. I just try to write to get something down, and then I make sure that my wife knows that I'm on her side. And those are 3 things I have to do every day to make my day worth it.
That is awesome. That is awesome. Misfit Nation, thank you for being here this evening. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. And we'll catch you next week on the ToosDay Crue.
And also, check us out Mondays on Reach Across America, 3 p.m. Eastern. Just to let you know, we're there every Monday now. Thank you.
All right. Matt, thank you so much. Misfit Nation, we love you.
Good night, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for checking us out and being a part of the Misfit Nation show. Don't forget to visit our website at themisfitnation.com. That's themisfitnation.com. Check out all our past episodes and get some of the great Misfit Nation gear for you and your family. As always, be humble, stay hungry, and keep hustling because we are
Misfit Nation. Misfit Nation.